Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, cut off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
What you know good, Ann Camp? You're listening to the Ann Campaign's Church Politics Podcast with Justin Gibney, a.k.a. Bishop Cooper's grandson. But once again, I am not alone. I'm here with Atlanta Mays High School's finest, Howard University's finest, man with the toughest 360 wave game in the Bible Belt, Dr. Jaha Howard. How you doing, brother?
Man, I'm doing well. I'll never get used to that introduction, but I'm doing well, man.
You're not supposed to. You're not supposed to. I'm also joined by the businessman extraordinaire, the Atlanta Politico, and the man with the toughest suit game in the greater Atlanta area, even though he never had wear a suit on here. You know what I mean? It's all good, though. Cory Ruth, what's going on, brother?
Not much, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I'm glad both of you are with us today. And I've said this, and we've been kind of doing this it's starting to be kind of a tradition. You know, part of what we do, again, is to critique. And critiques can come off sometimes as negative. But none of us are negative people. We're just analyzing the good and the bad of situations. So what I want y'all to do is give me one positive thing that's going on in culture or politics. I'll start off. And I want to give a big shout out to, because as people, I'm sure people understand, and we want to say rest in peace to Charlie Kirk. A lot of this episode is going to be about that situation. And so I want to give a shout out and commend Utah Governor Spencer Cox, who's actually come under a lot of scrutiny from some folks on the right, just for how he's handled the shooting, right? Which was obviously in his state. I think he's handled it like a leader, like someone who's trying to be responsible and turn down the temperature. And the National Review hit it on the head. This is what they had to say about what Spencer Cox is doing. They said, from start to finish, Cox's handling of this situation has been exemplary. His tone has been appropriate. His message has been correct. And most important of all, he has hidden nothing from the public. Mm-hmm. Unlike some public figures, and we'll talk about some of these folks, Cox neither got ahead of the story and spread rumors that turned out to be untrue, nor dragged his feet and withheld crucial details that he didn't trust us to receive. If we're to have governments, we need people to run those governments. Governor Cox has fulfilled his duties in that regard. So shout out to Governor Spencer Cox for how he's handling it. It's not easy. It hasn't been perfect, but I do think he's gone in the right direction, and I'm appreciative of that. Cory, what you got, man? What positive do you have for me?
Well, I was encouraged by Al Sharpton's response to this, and Al Sharpton gets a lot of exposure. So if he said something else that I might not be aware of, I don't want to be held accountable for that. But he said something that I think represented the well-rounded positivity that came out of this and unity that was drowned out by all of the negativity. I just took a quick quote of one of the things he said was that no clash of ideas can justify physical attacks, which can only bring about a vicious cycle of tragic retribution.
That's good. Okay. Thank you, Reverend Al Sharpton. What you got for us, Jaha?
Yeah, I was going to mention Utah's Governor Cox, and she said that. Actually, I'm thankful for you in the AND campaign. The Civic updates were spot on, and I just had a tough time trying to articulate what I was feeling and trying to have a Christ-like response. I just really appreciate your timeliness and thoughtfulness, Justin, part one and part two. And also Esau McCulley, he had some other things that kind of echoed the same kind of perspective. So I just wanted to just thank you and Esau McCulley for just giving a Christ-like response to how we can even approach such a tragedy like this political violent act. So thank you.
No, thank you for that, man. We appreciate it, and we are doing our best here at the AND campaign to provide. Esau McCauley is on our leadership council, and so it was good to see so many people within our our count, in our network really, hitting it on the head and getting it right. So it hasn't been all bad. It's been a tough moment. And I'll be honest with you guys. I found out I was on a plane flying from St. Louis back to Atlanta, and I'm seeing he was shot, and it was just a crazy moment because I was trying to figure out what's going on. Then I accidentally saw what happened, and it was rough, man. So I'm glad there are some people out there, some leaders out there that are getting it right, and that's always good to see. Well, before we get into it, I got to thank all our patrons and supporters for supporting us in what we do and how we do it. Look, this is what it is right now, especially in this moment, right? You guys listen to the Church Politics Podcast because you know how toxic the dialogue and the culture is, as we just saw. You listen to us because you know that the church isn't necessarily being the church in these moments, and you want it to change. That's why you listen to the Church Politics Podcast, because we have a framework, a gospel framework that we've applied to change these things. And so now you have two choices. You kind of sit on the sidelines and just listen, and you have that choice. I ain't mad at you. Or to say, nah, it's time to get in the game, to join this movement and be a part of something that's trying to help the church lead on issues like this and make the change. One way that you join the movement is we have chapters all over the country. You can go to our website and see those, or you can give, right? You can go to andcampaign.org/donate, and you can donate to the movement, as so many of you have already, or you can go to patreon.com/churchpolitics, and you can become a premium member, which means that you would give to the AND campaign monthly, and you would also receive an extra segment each week in addition to what everybody gets right here, okay? And you can even ask us questions and all that. But you guys know why you listen to this. You guys want change. Join us in this movement. It's a moment that we all got to step up and do something to make things better, all right? So y'all know what it is. Grab your Bible, get your mind right, and prepare to think, not like a Republican, not like a Democrat, but to think like a Christian. And if you don't mind, even if you do, I'm going to start with scripture. All right. And today's scripture is coming from Ephesians 4, verses 25 through 26. Ephesians 4, verses 25 through 26. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. In your anger, do not sin. I think that's a message that a lot of Christians need to hear in this moment. Some Christians are very angry about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Some are angry about other things and the response from the right and the issues they had with Charlie Kirk. But I want to remind us, in this moment of tension, who's going to be sober if it's not Christians? Who's gonna give an example to the world in this moment if we can't seem to pull ourselves together out of the passions to do what's right? Now, let me also say this before I get going. One of the problems I think the church has right now is we do too much preaching to the choir and not enough challenging ourselves. So, for instance, if my audience is mostly center left and center right people that don't support Trump, if all I do every single episode is talk about how bad MAGA is, if I do that for the majority of every single show, every single message, am I really edifying my audience? Think about it. If all I talk about is, if I'm a pastor and each week I go up and I have a church that is center left, and each week I go up and all I do is talk bad about conservatives the whole time, am I leading and edifying and shepherding my audience, my church? Okay, so I think it's important not just to say what you know people want you to say in the audience, but say what they need to hear. And this is something that I'm about to say that I think my primary audience, including myself, needs to hear. I want to say this. I want you to take some time before saying but in this conversation about the Charlie Kirk assassination. I want you to take some time before saying but. And this is what I mean. I'm hoping most, if not all, the people who are listening to me right now can clearly say that Charlie Kirk should not have been assassinated, that he should not have died in that way. So I hope nobody has any problem saying that. But what I want you to do is to say that without automatically saying but. Right? Charlie Kirk shouldn't have died, but he was this, but he was that, and all these other things. No. Hold off from the but for a few weeks, okay? Because we all know that if we say but too quickly in any conversation, whether you're going back and forth with anybody, if I acknowledge something and then I say but too quickly, it's often an indication that I missed the primary moral and point of the story or the lesson, right? So if I'm automatically saying, yeah, Charlie Kirk shouldn't have died, but immediately, which is what I hear a lot of people doing, I'm not focusing in on the primary principle here, the primary lesson here. All right. Every American is not going to turn MAGA just because you say Charlie Kirk shouldn't have died without qualification. And I'm asking you right now to hold off on that qualification. Because if we don't hold off on that qualification, the people who are listening to us are going to get the back end of the but that we're giving, right? But not the beginning of it. What came before that? Understood? All right. I hope that's helpful. As you heard, before I get into this deeply, as you heard, I had 2 Civic updates right after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. One was basically saying just what I said, that he should not have died based on his opinions, and that is no way to engage with your neighbor. And Christians need to be very clear about that without the but, without the qualification. All right. The second one was basically asking Christians a question. Is our response to tragedy dictated by the circumstances, dictated by our opponent's behavior, dictated by how bad we think our opponents are? Or is our response dictated by our faith and values? And me and Jaha, before we got on, were just talking about the fact that Christians usually know what Christian principles are. Love your neighbor, love your enemy, all that. But for some reason, when something like this happens, we think it's the exception to the rule. Yeah, I got to love my enemies, but Charlie Kirk was this or but that. Or, no, this moment is not an exception to the rule. This is when the rule actually matters. This is when our principles matter the most in the hard times. Christians, stop acting like this is some kind of exception. Whether you liked him or not, there are certain ways that we have to act, and this is not an exception to that, okay? I am glad to say that I got to read a really good article earlier today by my friend David French, who wrote something for the New York Times entitled, "There Are Monsters in Your Midst Too." He talks about a conversation he had with another writer, Michael Brendan Doherty, about partisan blindness. Why, when we can see the evil in the opposition so clearly, are we blind to our own faults? I think Jesus had a few parables about that. He says this, and he said that Brendan said this, Michael Brendan Doherty said this: when my opponents do something wrong, that's emblematic, meaning that's just what they do. That's who they are. But when my allies do something wrong, that's exceptional. That's the exception. That's not the way we are. And here's what he meant when he said that, is what David French said. If, say, you're a highly partisan Republican, you often look at corruption and acts of violence by your partisan opponents and say, that's what the left does, or that's what leftism leads to. Corruption and violence reveals the left's true nature. Do the same thing on the right. He says, as a result, no matter the facts of the moment, you end up mad at the opposition. If a left-leaning assassin kills a Republican, then you're angry because the left is violent. If a right-leaning assassin kills a Democrat, then you're angry because the left blames the right for what is obviously an individual evil act. Excuse me. He goes on to say that online algorithms magnify the problem. They recognize that you are hungry for content that amplifies every bad act by your political enemies, and that you hate to read or see any form of attack on your friends. So you live in a carefully curated false reality. This was a really good article, guys. And one thing that it made me think about immediately about the response here, and again, I'm talking to my audience, is how determined some people were to find fault, to find this to be the fault of the other side, right? I saw a lot of people who had issues with Kirk or don't like conservatives with little to no evidence or information had somehow convinced themselves that they knew that the shooter was MAGA. Somehow a conservative leader gets killed, and somehow we let influencers who are more about maintaining a narrative than actually putting out the truth, we let them convince us that it was actually somebody on the right who did this. Now, maybe as more information comes out, we find out different things. I don't know what we're going to find out, but let's be kind of honest. That doesn't make sense. And so before all the information is out, why would we jump to assuming that MAGA had to do this? Why? I think the answer is because we don't want to believe that anyone outside of our enemies is capable of that. We want to lie to ourselves and say, oh, we're not capable of doing something like that. It had to be them, even though it doesn't even make sense. And it brings to mind for me something that was said in my editor, Bonnie Christian's book, Untrustworthy Guys. She quotes Anna Hardin, who's a philosopher, about the mixture of gullibility and cynicism. She says, we're very cynical when the other side tells us something. We don't want to believe anything they say, but extremely gullible when we hear something that matches our narrative. And that's exactly what this is. Somebody with no real proof says, oh, he was MAGA because it had to be, and we want to believe it, so we believe it. The article ends with this. It says, Americans are going to have to face a painful fact. Evil isn't confined to one side of the American divide. There are monsters in your midst, too. Jaha, what's your reaction just to our inability or unwillingness to realize that we do have monsters on our side? And this could have happened on the left or the right. What's this resistance about?
Yeah, this is just another more dramatic expression of what we've been seeing anytime something bad is happening. We oftentimes give the most charity to folks who are quote unquote on our political side. And we don't give any charity at all. We have we assume the worst out of somebody who's on the opposite political side. And that's because we too often look at life through political and ideological lens instead of a Christian lens. A Christian lens would say we're in spiritual warfare and Satan is doing his dirt on both sides of the aisle. That's how a Christian would look at that. And Jesus would help us to kind of see that and walk through that with us. But as you alluded to, when things get hot, when there's a situation, it seems that our Christian lens defers to our ideological lens or whatever that identity that we hold dear. If we're not sure, our words might say our Christianity is our top priority as far as identity, but our actions say it's our blackness or it's our womanness or it's our maleness. So really difficult situations have a way of being that fire that exposes who we really are and where our faith really is. And this is all throughout Scripture. We kind of see this playing out.
Yeah. And one of the things that got me, I think you make some excellent points. One of the things that got me about this was it wasn't just your everyday Christian that was putting some of this stuff out. It was Christian leaders, well-known leaders with big platforms prematurely saying, oh, I know this is MAGA. I'm going to spread this to my whole, some stuff you just got to leave in the chat group. Right. So in chat groups, it's cool because you go back and forth. You're trying to figure out what's going on. People are sending different things from different places as you try to figure it out. You don't take it from the chat group and put it online when you don't have the information. There's no way that quickly people knew what they thought they knew. What they're trying to do is protect narratives. Right. Christianity is never about protecting a conservative or progressive narrative. It's about the truth. And if I don't have enough information to put the truth out there, to know the truth, then I need to leave it alone. If the truth happens to complicate my narrative or refute my narrative, then guess what? My narrative has to die. And that's what ideologues never want their narrative to do. And that's why we run into trouble. Go ahead, Cory, what are your thoughts, man?
You know, I had so much stuff rushing through my head. The biggest thing for me was, I tell the story about my mom. I always say, don't introduce me to dead people. We all have moms. They'll call you random and say, Johnny died. And you're like, who is Johnny? You remember I used to watch him and you when you were in third grade? I'm like, all this time, nothing good happened in Johnny's life. Johnny didn't get married. Johnny didn't have kids. You introduced me to Johnny when he dies. And so I found that same dynamic happening. People who never heard of Charlie Kirk, people who didn't follow Charlie Kirk, people who didn't listen to Charlie Kirk. I'm a Republican, and I don't think I've ever heard him string together a full sentence that I retained. I'm not his target audience. He speaks to a younger people. So I knew of Charlie Kirk. He's on Fox a lot and stuff like that. He's in sort of the media circles that I watch. I never listened to Charlie Kirk. And so I'm just the type of guy that if something happens to Charlie Kirk, I don't then start studying Charlie Kirk's teachings. And so for me, I was moved by the act of political violence or just violence in general. That's what I was moved by. And I just found a lot of people, to your point, just triggered by all of the things that he taught and said, even though they didn't even, this person was not even on their radar prior to. And I just think that's an interesting dynamic that people had in this case.
It was interesting. I mean, if we were honest, and a lot of people weren't necessarily being honest, when something like this happens, everything's moving around. And what I want people to understand so much, being in politics, what I do know is political actors are always at it. Right. And so a lot of the stuff that comes out is misdirection. It's uninformed, but it's trying to push you to come to a certain conclusion. As Christians, we need to have the discernment to say, let me focus on the first principle. The first principle is this should have never happened. And I can talk about the rest and we can get to the rest, but let me be very clear. As a Christian, this shouldn't happen. And we can get to the other things I might have had a problem with. But as always, it's almost like we think if I say, Charlie Kirk shouldn't have been assassinated, period, that if I don't put the but behind it again, then everybody in America is going to become my guy because I showed some compassion. That's how we act. Right. And as I said on Esau's show, everybody's just looking at the scoreboard. And so I'm looking at the scoreboard and seeing, are conservatives going to win this or progressives going to win this? Instead of saying, what does how can I speak into the human condition right now? How can I speak into the lives of people who might be radicalized by this? Yeah. Right? How can I speak into it to say, hey, this was absolutely wrong. Here's where we go. It can't become a nuclear culture war now, which is in many ways where we might be headed. But anything else, Jaha, to add?
Yeah, it's hard to be salt and light if you're first trying to see if someone's worth your empathy or worth your compassion. And that's what we're doing. We're sifting through like, am I going to get the right response? If I want to respond to this on social media, am I sending the right signal to my friend group and network that I'm on your side? I don't want to sound too on anyone's side. Like it's interesting. It's like, are we trying to please the Lord? Or are we trying to please our circles? Are we trying to make sure we get enough likes? Are we trying to, I don't want to make any assumptions, but I think we all saw some responses that were just really troubling. The humanity of it got lost. I love what you said about not rushing to the butt. Like, let's take a minute and acknowledge that we had a man, and you don't even have to qualify it out. He was a husband. He was like, even if he wasn't a husband, even if he didn't have children, a human being was exercising his platform and what he thought was important. And he was seemingly murdered for his ideology. Yeah. Like, let's stop right there first. And then I think if there's some common ground, like, hey, we can agree that this is terrible. Once you have some common ground, then we're in better position to wrestle through the controversial stuff.
to have a
But if we
constructive
rush, if we
our
go straight to the
conversation.
controversial stuff, like then we're again trying to score points instead of trying to win souls, instead of trying to introduce people to Jesus. And I think that again, the lens, this situation has a way of revealing who our real God is,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
that's what we're dealing with right now.
Corey?
Yeah, and the other thing is just taking it back to our real lives. We don't do this in our own personal lives. Somebody dies in your family or in your neighborhood who wasn't really a good person. We have a saying: if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. We still have a funeral. We still honor that person the best we can without drudging up all of the things that they did that might not have been bad. And even when we do stand in the funeral and say something bad, we try to couch it, in some kind of positive way or framing. And I feel like there's a cognitive dissonance that's happening in our world today because of the digital world. It's like people will say, well, this country is racist, for instance, but then they have great relationships with the whites in their own personal life, like the whites in their neighborhood, the whites who work with them, the whites who they encounter at the store or wherever. They don't have any problems with whites in their life. But then when you talk to them, they'll be like dripping with racial animus. And it's like, where's this cognitive dissonance happening? And so in your personal life, you're like, oh, the guy is dead. I didn't really know him. God, I feel bad that somebody shot him. That's it. I'm done. But in this world, like we shift and it's like now it's personal. But he said this about black people and he did that. And I'm like, yeah, well, obviously what he said about black people wasn't that powerful because you didn't know about it before he died. But you do now. And I just feel like, we have to go back to being humans.
Mm-hmm.
And we're kind of like we're kind of morphing into this digital world and it's creating this like this cognitive dissonance that no one's addressing.
And then just kind of policing how people mourn. If somebody's mourn with the mourning, I can't police everything that you say about it. If somebody's really hurt about this, I can't expect them to say exactly what I want them to say. Focus on the first principle. So we're going to focus on the first principle right now, which is Charlie Kirk should not have been shot and killed, assassinated, right, for exercising his free speech. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. We'll be right back on the Church Politics Podcast.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
And we are back on the Church Politics Podcast. Now, we just got through talking about David French's article and just some of our own thoughts about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And one of the points that we made is that we're so clear on what's wrong with the other side, but can't even imagine, don't want to allow ourselves to believe that our side could do something like this, right? So there was a good quote from Megan McArdle, who is a columnist for the Washington Post, and this was also in the David French article. And here's what she said. She said, one thing that's clear from the online debate over whether the left or the right is more violent is that many people have an encyclopedic command of the attacks perpetuated by the other side, and you have memory hold attacks by their co-ideologists. I think that's really true. I mean, people can name those, but not name others. And we kind of talked about why that's the case. But I want to get you guys' general response to the assassination and the response to the assassination. And just how you felt about it. Go ahead, Jaha.
Yeah, it's I am deeply troubled by this assassination, and looking at this track record of political violence over the last several years, uh, it seems like we're living in a very uniquely violent time on both sides of the ideological spectrum, and I think that we are in some significant danger because of our silos and the echo chambers and our and what the algorithms do to the information that we want more of and the information that we want to see less of. So I'm deeply troubled, and also looking at the track record of what people in power do when they have an excuse to do more. Um, I'm seeing this thread even with Israel and in Gaza, like October 7th. Yes, there was a horrible attack, Hamas on Israel. That I think over response. And my brain is connecting some dots on like some potential of what we can see through power. When there's a narrative, can be this kind of like this moment that galvanizes that we can point to say, see, they are this. So this justifies all of these other actions that I've been wanting to do anyway. So I don't want to drift too much, but I'm seeing a connection there, and I just wanted to share I'm deeply troubled by what I saw, what I've seen, but I think that we're moving in a dangerously, even more terrible situation or direction.
You hit on a good point. What I think you're saying is some people see tragedy as an opportunity to push forward certain agendas even further.
And those some people tend to be very powerful, very powerful and capable.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm concerned about.
I don't want people to, because a lot, I understand a lot of people didn't know of Charlie Kirk. I did, because that's my job. I keep up with, thought leaders, whether I agree with them or not. I keep up with them. And so I kind of knew who he was, knew what he was on. I don't think people realize how big of a moment this is to a lot of young conservatives. One of the things that Charlie Kirk was able to do, he was able to go into academia, which I think by any objective standard is controlled by secular progressivism, right? He was able to go in there and debate with them. And in some instances, some arguments I disagree, but in some instances, show the weakness of some of those arguments they were making. And so what I've gathered is for a lot of young conservatives who are on those campuses and who were kind of pushed aside and all that stuff, he became, whether you like it or not, he became their hero in that space because he did something that they probably might have never dreamed somebody would be able to do. And so now they have this person they were looking up to, and we're talking about millions of people. Don't sleep. Charlie Kirk had a big impact on young people turning towards Trump in this last election. Turning Points was in the middle of all of that, getting young people out. And if you don't know, you need to read up on it. They were in the middle of all of that. So him not being here is a big moment in how a lot of these developing thinkers are how they're going to develop and move forward. This might be define the ideological kind of persuasion of a lot of young people and how they think about America, how they think about the discourse. It is not a time to go back and forth with each other. It's a time to draw out those principles and make sure that everybody's standing on that ground first and foremost. Cory, tell me a little bit about your reaction to all of this.
Well, just you're kind of trying to paint the context for how influential Charlie Kirk was in the conservative world. There's an annual Turning Points conference, and the who's who of Republicans go there to sort of get in front of young voters. And I've watched that conference just grow and grow and grow and become more and more essential. If you are a candidate or if you are an elected official, if you have any national aspirations. So a few weeks ago, before Charlie Kirk was murdered, I'm laying in bed, I'm flipping through YouTube, and I see a Turning Point conference, right? So I click on it. It's in Hungary. I was like, what is going on here? And so they had their own Turning Point conference And so now you see these large rallies happening in different parts of the world. I think it was South Korea, London, and they're saying, "We are Charlie Kirk." And it's a bigger movement than people think, than I thought. And so I was thinking, if you are, I was in Europe when the EU kind of first took over, and they were teaching the young college students that you're not French, you're not German, you are European. And so if you're in Europe and you believe, no, I'm French or I'm German or I'm British, if you are wondering why all this immigration is happening, if you're frustrated over the deindustrialization of your country, then that was speaking to you. And I think a lot of Americans who haven't traveled as much will be surprised to know that there are billions of people around the world living vicariously through our democracy. And so when things like this happen, when things like January 6th happen, this is an embarrassment because they look to us and they're struggling, fledgling democratic movements to be more like America. And so that was one of the things. But and I'll just say this real quick: the context is that we have a long history of political violence in this country. In 1804, the vice president of the United States shot and killed the former Treasury Secretary of the United States. Aaron Burr shot Alexander Hamilton and killed him. He died the next day. And he shot him because he had, quote, despicable opinions, unquote, of him, and while he was trying to run for governor of New York. And so it's almost full circle, so we go from Burr killing Hamilton, and nothing happened, by the way, to him. And then we go to the Civil War. We go to the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. We go to not long after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, they stormed the White House and they burnt the president in effigy. They created a scarecrow that looked like the president, burned it on the White House lawn. And then, you can fast forward to the 60s, all of the assassinations happening there, JFK, MLK, RFK, and then fast forward to our times where we see January 6th happening, or we see BLM happening, or we see, unfortunately, the assassination attempt on President Trump, and then the successful assassination of Charlie Kirk. And so I think our brand of freedom, where we are a very large country with free people who have a unique form of freedom of speech that they don't even have in Europe, we're susceptible to this type of escalation. And so our leaders have to work extra hard and be extra careful to moderate our language and to encourage people to, have that battle in the marketplace of ideas and not with physical violence.
And not with physical violence. Because when it goes there, it's, if it continues to go there, it's hard to turn around.
Yeah.
And so we need to really think about, and here's what I want to tell people. There's almost this feeling that being compassionate and empathetic in this moment weakens you, or weakens your response, or somebody won't think you disagree because you actually said, man, this shouldn't have happened. That's not the case. Nothing about compassion weakens you. It actually gives you credibility. It actually allows you to be sober-minded as you go into very serious conversations and very serious discourse. That's what that does. It clears your mind. And as Christians, we should know that. And I understand that it's hard to see in this moment. It doesn't mean, hey, I'm compassionate, therefore I'm gonna let who and whatever he represented, I'm not gonna say nothing about it. Nobody said that. That's not what anybody's saying. But you screaming about it, you being unable to show any compassion in this moment, you lose credibility. And so when the debate comes back up, when the policy comes back up, when it's time to say something, good faith observers are looking at you and saying, I don't know if I can trust what you're saying because you don't have the right spirit. And to what Chris was saying too, I'm sorry, to what Cory was saying too, we have a spirit of violence we really have to deal with. And we can either say it's all them or whatever, or we can say it's us as America, and we need to deal with it. Anything else, Jaha?
No, I think y'all nailed it. At the end of the day, it's a spiritual warfare that Christians have to make sure that we're keeping in mind and provide that narrative, that sober-minded narrative. The world needs to hear it from somewhere. And if we don't do that, we are not being salt and light. And this is exactly when we're supposed to be salt and light, not conforming to the world.
That's right. We will be right back on the Church Politics Podcast.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
And we are back on the Church Politics Podcast. And I think you both know that leadership in this moment is very important in regard to the path that this nation will take after a tragedy like this. President Trump was asked a couple of days ago, how can we bring the country together? How do we tone all this down? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't really care about all that. I might get in trouble for saying this, but the activism on the left is about destruction. The activism on the right is about construction and making sure things work. We just need to defeat those people on the left was basically the message. Cory, talk to me about, I'd like to hear your response to that and what you think the path forward should look like.
Yeah, man, love is not reducible to agreement on political issues. And Dr. Cornel West, I don't remember the exact quote, but he talks about not being optimistic about the future or pessimistic, but being a prisoner of hope. And I think that's what we need to be preaching today, is that is hope. And I think that's something that we lost somewhere. And maybe it happened as we went into the new millennium. Our political discourse, our the way that we fight one another, it has been vicious, and it's continued to escalate, and it's tit for tat, and it's gotten to the point where it's beyond just shutting down the government or impeaching someone like was done to Bill Clinton. And now it's at a point where we're bringing up criminal charges on both sides, and we are we've just really escalated our battles. And at some point, someone's going to have to just put the guns on the table and have a truce, because the people are going to follow the example of the leaders. And so I think that's, right now, I'll tell you this is my observation being in conservative circles, is that Republicans feel probably the same way Democrats feel, very attacked, very much leaning forward in the foxhole. They are in a pitched warfare. And it's almost like the Ukraine and Russia war. It's like we cannot get to a ceasefire. And so I don't know how we get there. So I quoted Cornel West. I'm not really optimistic about it anytime in the near future. I'm hopeful and I'm prayerful. And I certainly hope that, this is not returned. That assassination, that we don't see it happen again, because if you look through our history of political violence, you see rashes of violence. And so I'm just prayerful that this doesn't become a rash. that is something that can be isolated. But that's going to take us elevating above it.
Yeah. Any comments on the president's words?
So this is my first time hearing them. I've tried to tune this stuff out because it's gotten so toxic. But I think we're just pitched, man. It's like we are pitched. I called it the other day a holy war, and I think the White House feels like they're in a holy war, and so they're not. I mean, and I'm just giving a counter perspective. This is not me placing a value on this. I just want to, in their minds, this is a man that was impeached twice. He was shot at. His home was raided. His cabinet members were imprisoned, like General Flynn. He had an attorney general in New York who tried to bankrupt him. And I think in his mind, he's thinking that this is an existential fight for not only for his life, but for his movement. And I think that's what we have to tone down. It's more than just the rhetoric. It's like, how do we lower the political tactics that we have on both sides to get back to a normal place of political conflict, which is I'm going to filibuster your bill, and I just think that we're way past that. Like I said, not optimistic about the future.
All right. And one thing that you named was this tension to where both sides feel like they're the ones being persecuted.
Right.
And what creates that tension and how both sides could feel like that, even when they're in power, right? So I could be in control of the presidency, the Supreme Court, or I could be in control of over most of academia and still feel like I'm the one being persecuted. That's the culture war, right? That's the attitude. That's the posture of the culture war. And that's where those narratives bring us to that place, and it maintains that tension because we're looking at the scoreboard and it's all or nothing. What's the path forward, Jaha?
I think the path forward is to have a Christ-like approach, but know that a tree is going to bear the fruit of that tree. And I think we're seeing the fruit of the tree. We have folks with using the name of Christ that's wrapping it into nationalism, that's connecting to a nationalist kind of movement all over internationally, as Cory is mentioning, and throwing Jesus' name on it in many instances. I don't think God's going to be very happy with this. And there's a part of me that believes that we're going to see things get worse, and that's going to be the wake up call to where we say, maybe this ultra combative, violent, who can say the worst or most obnoxious things to win a primary, and then like this whole thing, I think unfortunately it seems like it has to get worse before folks wake up out of this mess and say this is not the way forward. My prayer is that it won't be so destructive that we end up in a horrible civil war type of situation. But I really believe people in power believe that that's necessary to move forward. So yeah, you'll know a tree by its fruit, and I think we're gonna see more disgusting fruit before it gets better. I don't hope that doesn't sound pessimistic. I'm actually optimistic that ultimately, the truth will be seen and there will be leaders that will rise through this. But having a disposition and a sober mindedness that I think is necessary. I think we'll see it, but I think it might have to hurt even worse as a country before it gets better. Unfortunately, we don't learn.
Yeah. It was once said that you can't create desolation and call it peace. And I think right now, the intention on the extremes of both sides is to get rid of the other side. And that's the only way that there can be peace. But I want to warn you. Number one, it's unlikely that you're going to get rid of everybody on the other side. Number two, if something were to happen where you did, I wouldn't want to be you. Because that means you did something terrible. And unless we have sober minds and sober leaders and constructive minds and constructive leaders who are willing to stand up against their own side at times and say no and push the butt back, right? and focus on the principle, we're going to be going down a terrible road. Here's the answer. Not kumbaya, not acting like everything's all good, not acting like we agree with people who we don't, but debating and persuading those people in the public square. That's the answer. If you are right as you say you are, then debate and prove it. If you can't do that, then maybe you're not that right. And that's what we have to lean on in this. I mean, I really feel I've read so much Frederick Douglass, and that's what they would say in this moment. Mm. It's time to have the conversation in a real way, and let everything fall where it may once you have that conversation. But this is not the way to go. Mm. If we try to destroy one another, none of us are going to end up in a better place. As always, thank you for joining us. I appreciate having these two brothers to talk about this really tragic situation. I want y'all to know that we take all the conversations that are being had seriously. We felt it important to focus on that first principle of the idea that nobody should be hurt or killed for their opinions, for exercising their free speech. That's what this was about. It doesn't mean we don't have other issues, but we're going to focus on that. All right? And Camp, you know what it is. There's a cross that neither political conservatism nor progressivism is fit to bear. There's a civic hearing in need of faithful witnesses who love social justice and won't surrender the truth to be loved by the world. Politic with the boldness and compassion of Jesus Christ. Until next time, man, Camp. Well, holla at you.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.